We sorry for the delay. It was supposed to be in at 10. Now 12 minutes. Sorry for that. We'll pray and then begin. Let's pray. Lord, we thank you for giving us this Sabbath. We thank you for the opportunity to gather and learn and fellowship with each other. We pray that as we will be going through the session, may your Holy Spirit dwell upon us. In Jesus' name we pray. Uh, I have a topic that is so broad, and I'll try to just summarize and see where it begins. So we are going to look at nature of human being, but specifically we're going to deal with the thoughts. And, it's quite a long title, but we will break it down. So we have three components. We have the thought, consciousness, and then prayer and meditation are groups as one. So we look at those three elements, and then we see how the three aspects tie together. So I want us to begin with the first one, which is thoughts. And when we do some reading from the Spirit of Prophecy to get some information about thoughts. So I want us to go to the book Mind, Character, and Development. No, Mind, Character, and Personality, volume 2, section 14, that is chapter 72. So the abbreviation, you want to search it with the MCP 655. We can begin with the paragraph or the form. That will take you to the chapter I want us to put some reading and then we fix some points. And then whoever is there can help us.
As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Many thoughts make up the written history of a single day, and these thoughts have much to do with the formation of character. Our thoughts are to be strictly guarded. One impure thought makes a deep impression on the soul. An evil thought leaves an evil impression on the mind. If the thoughts are pure and holy, the man is better for having touched them. By them, the spiritual pulse is quickened, and the power for doing good is increased. And as one drop of rain prepares the way for another and moistening the earth, so one good thought prepares the way for another.
Okay, so that is paragraph 1. I want us to pick what we've learned about thoughts from there, the characteristics of thoughts, or even the definition or the power that they have. So to make a distinction, the type of thought we are talking about, it is not the simple. Sometimes you use thought, someone that what they're thinking about, and then you can describe logical sequence of events or circumstances. So, for example, if I give you a math problem, which is slightly difficult, then you will have to think, trying to connect different principles to solve that problem. So that is uh, one of the way we use a thought. So it is that process of solving problems, a cognitive process. But the thought we are talking about is much broader. And the one that usually need when we are talking about the nature of human being. You remember in 2017 we said that the nature of human being is threefold, and we had the moral, we had the physical, and what's the other one? The intellectual. So we group them into higher power and then the lower power. So where is thoughts falling at, or what is that thought in me? No, first, where does thought fall between the three, the lower powers? Yeah. So if it is the lower power, what is it? How do we, what is that thought? From that perspective, how do we define that? How do we understand it? Any thoughts? Lower power, we say thoughts, feelings, emotions. So what is that thoughts? How do you understand it?
It's just our natural, whatever our natural uh, things which we are having in our mind. Those things are.
Yeah, so Carol says something that is in our mind. Yeah. So thoughts, the reason why we categorize them under the law, because I remember there was a time we had some problems trying to put it from the higher power when you think about solving a problem and you say, but I'll be using rationale to or reason, and then we say you are thinking. So you're given a problem and then you think, and then we thought that due to that fact, then thought should be placed on the higher power, but the study places it on the lower power. So it tells you that it is not simply about reasoning. There is something that is used to define that thought so that it falls under the lower power. And one of the characteristics of the lower powers are what are the what is the main difference between lower powers and the higher power? How do we what do we use to categorize and say now this is a lower power thing, force, and these are lower power, higher power force? I think how will we categorize what criteria will we use?
So I'm thinking automatic.
Yeah. So they are more traumatic, they're more impulsive, and they are always, if not restricted, always they are out of control. So that does not mean they will always do a bad thing, but they will come and then later you'll evaluate and say, oh, that was bad, that was good. But when they were happening, they were impulsive and not in control. You are not actively with your brain deciding to think that thing or do that thing. So that is what. So when we say thoughts are placed there, then it tells you that it is not always the thought that we are describing to be under the law of power is not a deliberate way of solving a problem. It is something that is impulsive, something that is more traumatic. So the way you think about it is that you could be looking at me one time, you're following the trail of thought you're discussing, another time you are at home, another time you are thinking about yesterday. So the the phenomenon of your brain moving or your mind moving from one event to another without actually planning to do that is the thought we are talking about. So the thoughts which is you are here and then you remember yesterday something happened. You are not planning when someone asks you, what are you going to do in the next 5 minutes? You will say I will focus on the study, but amidst that, you realize that you've seen someone's chat and then that reminds you of another thing, and then you are completely out of this environment. So that shift from one point to another is the thought that we are talking about, and it is impulsive, and it's not always controlled unless it is intentionally controlled the way we can do with the lower power. So I wanted to make that distinction. So that is the thought that we are going to talk about, not the other one. And that is the thought that form part of our human nature. So back to the quote. What can we pick? Many thoughts make up the unwritten history of a single day. So what does that statement mean? And again, that is the thought we're talking about when we are dealing with this chapter 72. It's called thought habits. So as a man thinketh in his heart, so he. So wherever your thought leads you, it is going to affect how you respond and how, even physically. So how you respond and what you are going to do next is highly likely to be influenced by where your thought is. So you think about an horrible event and then your body starts reacting to it. That event is not there, but you react to that thought just as if that event is happening. So most of the things that you are going to do are going to be influenced by the environment that those thoughts are creating. So that's why it is saying, as you think, where you are is who you are. Because you want to affect what it is, how your body responds, and the actions that you're going to take. There's a quote that says, thoughts leads to actions, actions leads to habit, habit leads to character, and character is what is taken to heaven. So from there we can find thoughts at the root of the entire this entire thing of character formation or even actions, all are functions of thoughts. So anasema many thoughts make up the unwritten history of a single day. So those small thoughts that shift and changes how you react is going to lead to actions that are going to form the history or events that have happened in that day. So our thoughts are to be strictly guarded. So number one, you realize that thoughts influence events, actions. They influence actions and events. And then the next thing we are taking from the quote is that we are now being given a counsel that we should strictly guard the thoughts. So what does that tell you about the thoughts? As a member of lower power, that you can control it. India. So thoughts are controllable. These are characteristics. Then we are told if the thoughts are pure and holy, the person is better for having cherished them. So they happen randomly. Let's say you are not controlling them. Let's assume you're not controlling them. So you suddenly think about thing, and then it leads you to doing a kind action. So we say that is good. So that is why anasema if our thoughts are to be strictly guarded for one impure thought. Okay. So for one impure thought, one impure thought makes a deep impression on the soul. So there's another characteristic apart from them being controllable. Then you're told you have one thought, one impure thought. And what does it do? It leads to makes a deep impression on the soul. So I'm just going to state what that statement means because we're not going to dissect it fully. But the point is, if you start thinking about something, then you are highly likely that is going to attract other thoughts of the same thing. So if you are thinking about a stressful event, then the mind is going to build an entire environment of thoughts surrounding the same thing that you are talking about. So that's why someone has to be positive. So that when you start thinking about something good, then there is a high likelihood that it is going to change the environment of thoughts and attract thoughts that are of the same thing. And we may discuss that later if you have time. So when the quote says that one thought leaves a deep impression on the soul, it means that there is a big impact that is going to have on the soul. Have a big impact on the soul. An evil thought leaves an evil impress on the mind, so it triggers and it creates an impression. It motivates you to move towards an evil action, for example. If the thoughts are pure and holy, the person is better for having changed them. So if the thoughts are bad, then bad for you. If the thoughts are good, then you are better at accumulating them or having them or containing them. So when you say that thoughts are controllable, the point is you try as much as possible to dispel the negative thoughts and cultivate positive thoughts. By then, the spiritual power is quickened and the power for doing good is increased. So the power for doing good, if you have good thoughts, are increased. Contrast, the power for doing evil things, if you have evil thoughts, are increased. And as a drop of rain prepares the way for another in motion in the earth, so one good thought prepares the way for another. So that's what we are talking about. So if you have one thought, how can I do that? Thoughts attract thoughts of the same thing, for example. Or similar thing. Yeah. So one thought as a one drop of rain prepares the way for the rest of good thoughts. So if you move to the next paragraph, it's still going to emphasize on the power to choose thought topics. So it's still going to emphasize on thoughts being controllable. So I'm going to explain to you why you have the power to choose what to think. And then the next one also requires personal effort. So for you to do that, there is an effort that you have to put in place to ensure that you are controlling the thoughts. So it's an intentional, effortful thing to do. Thoughts to be trained is the same thing. Training the thoughts. And again, the paragraph page 656.2 is talking about how to train the thoughts. The actual discipline of life is made up of the little things. The training of thoughts is essential. So again, it's clearly enforcing the point that almost our entire life and character and actions and behavior have a root of the thoughts that we are having. And remember, thoughts are under the lower power. So you can imagine how stressful that can be. Like your entire life is based on a lower power function, which can be literally random. But the good news is that with that awareness, we can try as much as possible to start having control of those thoughts, which again will mean that we are trying to have control of our actions and we are trying to have control of our formation of our character. So without that understanding, then you are left at the mercies of the environment or wherever that thoughts are coming from. So you have almost no control. And I think that is where the problem comes. when we had the study about the nature of human being in 2017, our focus was that the power of the will, that when you sin, then what that means is that you have a weak power of the will. So the advice was train to be strong. And I think when we first moved to 2020, we had the study of thinking fast and slow, which is the system 1 and system 2, slow brain and fast brain. And what that taught us is that it was an awakening to reflect on the understanding of human being that we have developed in 2017. And what that was saying is that the lower powers are not what we think they are. They are more powerful. They dominate most of our actions and behavior. And so we assume that the power of the nature of we assume that the power of the lower powers and the influence they had, and we try to diagnose we try to reflect on the solution that we are giving to sin or avoiding sin, which is the strength of the higher power, and we realize that that model is not very efficient. You need to have a deeper understanding of how behavior and character happens so that you can deal with sin rather than just telling the congregant that someone abused you, you have the power not to react. So that study then led us to the next study, which is the sympathetic and parasympathetic. So what that third study was doing is trying to diagnose the power of the environment in controlling our behavior in a manner that it's so difficult to manually control, especially when that event is happening. So it zoomed to the environment and how the environment impact of how the lower powers interact with the environment and how those lower powers then leads to the actions, and then those actions leading to character development or habits. So we came out from this be strong model to surrendering to the nature of human being and trying to work with it from the practical way in which it is supposed to operate. So I would say that in 2017, we did not have a complete diagnosis of how the nature of human being worked. And once you have that problem, then you're going to have a problem with character formation because you will be trying to solve a problem that you don't understand using ways that are not accurate. So that is how the study has developed from 2017 to 2020 and then now to sympathetic and parasympathetic. And also worth mentioning is there was a moment when we talked about the brain, and the book that was referred to was the Gendered Brain, by Gina Reform. And what that study was doing is what was zooming at brain from the scientific perspective and understanding its characteristics and how it controls our body and even the actions that we are doing. So that has been the summary of the development of the study of nature of human being. So having understood that about thoughts, and the bearing it has, and how our understanding of of it has developed as part of the lower powers, I want us to look at the study that I mentioned about the gender brain, that subject, and draw some points. So what that study was doing is that I don't call it gender brain. Yeah, find it out. So one of the, if I just give us more recap of what that study or what that movie is about and how it fits into our model of understanding of the nature of human being. is that human beings have been trying to understand why we behave the way we do. And there are different models, from scientific models to spiritual models, which are trying to explain to us why we behave the way we behave. So if I do something and someone predicts what I did by understanding the factors that have led me to that decision or action. So some of the models are about the scientific models which are out there, are about evolution, which is trying to explain, looking at how we live and then trying to say, oh, you know, in the past we had this need and they developed these features to fit that need. So there is that explanation. So the problem that that author realized is that, especially with that understanding of evolution and how it affects our behavior, specifically gender, is that it was based on assumptions that are biased. So in trying to debunk those assumptions that are coming from evolutionary science, in trying to explain the gender difference, the study of the book focuses on what some features of the brain, and one of those features is that the brain is plastic. You remember this? What does brain being plastic mean? What does the when someone says the brain is plastic, what does that mean?
Means it can be molded, yeah, changed. It means it's not static, it can change. Even physically, yeah, it can change. Not particularly the shape, but it's
Yeah. So the structure of the brain is not fixed. Something that is being inferred by evolutionary science, at least to some extent, not completely. So they say that because we develop this feature for the need of a certain thing, then that is the brain that we inherit. So it's going to explain how we behave. But this study of this book is trying to say that the brain is more plastic than we inherit. So me doing something today does not specifically mean that 1,000 years ago, my great parents or great parents had a need and they developed that feature, so I inherited directly. So it's trying to focus on brain being so plastic to the point that it can be altered within a few years or days or a lifetime, can completely alter the brain to define who you are. So the brain is plastic. And then number two, there is something, the predictive nature of the brain. This is about how the brain functions. So the brain being plastic means that it interacts with the environment. So if you have a child and then it is an environment that is giving that child a certain vibe, then the brain is going to morph to fit that environment. Another feature of the brain that is talked about is that it is predictive. By being predictive means that it's not just passive. You're not just going to mold it it holds to the data that you give it, trying to create models to predict what is going to happen if those characteristics, if it notices those characteristics that it used to create that model. So for example, if you used to shout to a child, yes, the brain will try to adapt to that environment and create mechanisms for the child to survive in that environment. And that may include being anxious, so that and at that point, anxiety is just a way of trying to deal with a toxic environment. It's not inherently a bad thing. Now the problem comes is that when we remove that environment and the brain created this anxiety, which works with shouting. So if I have someone shout, then anxiety creeps in, forcing me to act. Because as a child, that is how you are going to avoid harm in that environment. So your brain has created that model. When you move that environment, and now there's someone just celebrating someone, and then you hear that voice, the brain is not going to pause and say, wait a minute, there is a brain or it's going to kick in that model and then it's going to force you to act, which is going to be erratic. So you're going to act on a wrong, you're going to act on a wrong course because the brain cannot differentiate. So the brain is predictive. So there's something I wanted to mention. That's why I took that shot, but I'll see if it comes. So don't worry, if it doesn't time. Now remember it's not then time. So just hold it out. So now this is much about the thoughts. This is much about the thoughts because of time. I want us now to move to these other components, which is consciousness, and then see how it will tie with all this. So I'm going to give a disclaimer that consciousness is a complex topic that I don't understand. Well, not even well, I don't understand. Well, I understand a small fraction maybe, but I'm just going to give a general thought that I think is helpful, not to go deep into the scientific studies of what consciousness is or philosophical study. That one I don't have that expertise, but we can develop models that can be practical, and that will force us to at least develop some surface understanding of what it is. So I know you've met this, and I've given a disclaimer that I also don't understand. So I will ask us to, if you feel there is something that I mentioned that is not accurate, just tell me. And if you feel there's something in this one, you can also tell me because there is no expertise in that area. So I know we've heard about consciousness, and I'm going to ask someone to give me their thoughts. Yes, is there consciousness? All that awareness. So consciousness is awareness. Mm-hmm. Any other person or do you want to explain? I'm a mute. Any other person? Joe, scare consciousness, unasikia nini?
On top of awareness, also also being perceptive. So I'll combine awareness and perceptive.
Perceptive. Perceptive.
Yeah, and this is in reference to your environment or
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So you can perceive. Yeah. Any other addition to that? Yes.
So,
Yes.
But yeah, consciousness as the moral compass, the thing that's when we do something wrong, that's that conviction, that is really wrong, that is.
Yeah, that is an important element. So it is also part of the nature of human being. Part of their
Isn't that conscious?
yeah.
I just realized.
Yeah, it's conscious.
Which is different from
It's not
conscious.
the same.
Yes. Though there is a link. Yeah, but there's a link, but the one we talk about is conscious. So consciousness is broader, but the conscious is there. You can link it. So we so if I define it, it is a consciousness is the ability to have a subjective experience. What that means is it is the fact that you are experiencing something. So it is the term subjective is subjective. What does being subjective mean? We're gonna subjective and objective. So subjective inamaanisha, if I say I'm having a subjective experience, yes,
Something that is relative to you.
yeah, it is relative to you. So you are the reference. Ndio? So subjective is something relative to you. So we'll talk about this you. So it means you are the reference point to that experience. So if I say my experience is subjective, I mean it is true from my perspective, but it might not be true to someone's perspective because I'm the master in that equation. So if it is objective, then it means I'm not the reference point. I'm just part of the bigger picture. So there's a reference point somewhere, and I'm just an objective. I'm having an objective experience. So if the experience is about what are some of the objective truth that we have? It's the same as subjective truth and objective truth. An objective truth does not care whether who you are. Everyone is. It is the reference point. The truth is the reference point. But a subjective truth means that truth, the reference point, and then that truth is. So you can have a different one.
Example that always comes to mind is
Yeah.
the earth is not flat.
Yeah.
So, like that is speak on whatever that's does not count. So that is an objective truth.
Yes.
Whether you think otherwise about it not true.
Yeah. So it's not relevant because the earth being flat is based on a certain thing that does not care about what you're thinking of feeling. So consciousness is subjective. That means you are the reference point to that experience. So there are different dimensions of consciousness. We have different dimensions. One is
May I add some?
yes, you can mention.
I like the example of plant art
Yes.
because there are some people who they say that is the truth is that it's flat, you know. So I think it also shows, I guess, in terms of you can call it a great controversy.
Yes.
It actually comes down not to subjective truth, but objective truths being, I don't know if it's redefined or what, but someone says that is the truth, another one says no, that is the truth. You know, that sort of.
Yeah. So it becomes subjective.
Yeah, like the something like that, because objective truth should not be subjective. I guess
Yeah.
everyone should see that whatever the truth is, it's indisputable.
Yeah.
But then now that's now, I guess, what the great controversy is about, where an objective truth is being made subjective.
Yeah. And the subjective one made objective. Yeah. So we have different dimensions. So there's the phenomenon of consciousness, which is experience. So don't worry about the ones, we explain them. This is experience. So what this is, this is what something is like. It's the feeling of pain, the taste of something, or the perception of something like color. So just to explain this, is that assume you've never seen a certain color like red. And then someone tried to go down the route of science and everything to describe, color is this way and doing this and this and this. And then you'd be pretty confident that you know red. But what is it like experiencing or seeing that red? Another example would be someone can explain to you what being annoyed means. Severe. If you're annoyed, the brain does this and chemical does this, and then you have this certain feeling. But you can have that knowledge, but you never experience. If you never experience that anger, then that knowledge, yes, it is true, but again, it does not give the full picture of what anger is, because for you to know what anger is, then you have to experience it. So there is the difference between understanding that is the intellectual or trying to create models to help us know something and then actually experiencing something. So that is so consciousness is saying that this phenomenal consciousness is the actual act of being in that experience. It is something which is subjective. So we can have objective understanding of what it is, but the actual experiencing of it is more subjective to you. So yeah. So that experience will only exist from your perspective. Yes, we can have definitions, but when Karen is angry, Karen is the only person who understands what that anger is that moment. So when I'm angry also, then I'm the one who is experiencing it. So it is more subjective. That is one dimension of learning consciousness. Another one is about awareness. Another dimension is awareness, being conscious of something. For example, an external thing like sound. So the next dimension is awareness. So awareness is when something is conscious, they are unconscious. So it ties to that. So when you are aware of the sound that is outside the objects and the people, and even your thoughts, your memories, your emotions, your bodily sensations, then you're saying that you are conscious, you're experiencing consciousness because of that awareness. So the awareness can be internal awareness, external awareness, like things like sound, people, or even your group. You understand or you experience what they are, you understand what they are. People, objects. Then we have internal, like thoughts, 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 memories, emotions, memories, emotions. So those are not, that is another dimension. So these are also subjective. And then we have cognitive or function of consciousness. So there is function of consciousness or cognitive. So what this is, um, now this is where the thinking fast and slow, both the fast brain and slow brain comes in. So when we talk about this, um, when someone says that I did that consciously, what do they mean? Or I did that unconsciously. What is the difference? That comes to, remember, we have fast brain. Fast brain is you do things unconsciously. You make decisions. Like you don't sit and say, I want to move now. The first thing is to make this step and then move in this direction, in this, and you just do. You have a reference point of where you're going. Then now what is going to carry you from this point to the next is completely automated. So it is unconscious decisions, like steps you're making, having breathing, they are unconscious because you don't bring reasons to them. And then there are some which are conscious, like when you're learning something new, now you have to think, I have to add this to this to this to this to come to that solution. So when you do that enough, you create those shortcuts, which now move that whole process to unconscious state, which is the first brain. So that's another dimension of how people can assess consciousness. So that ability with the awareness to use, to understand that this thing is new, I want to arrive to this, and then I'm going to use different models, bring them together to help me. So that is also kind of subjective. That is why it's so difficult to pinpoint. You can have the same answer, but the process of with which you're thinking to read, to write, or arrive at that answer, yes, we can have logical way of thinking. But the actual experience of going through that is more subjective. Though now it is guided with those frameworks that we have. So the last one, so this is about reasoning reported on speech. You can report what you are or what you are doing, how you are reasoning, and then it is also usable in decision making, the way we are talking about fast brain and slow brain. So that is the third dimension. And then we have the fourth one, which is of more interest for our study. Time is over. So the fourth one is self-consciousness. So this is the point, this is the main one that we want to look into. So we have self, maybe one. So we have self-consciousness. And this one, it's an interesting one. It is awareness of oneself as an entity. So if you remember, we said that a subjective thing, you are the reference to that experience. So being aware that I'm the reference to what I'm experiencing is what self-consciousness is. So it gives you relative to you. Being aware that you have this one is what is self-consciousness. So just to explain and give examples, when you tell me I am thinking, you are acknowledging that there is something that is called thinking, and you are acknowledging that there is an entity that is doing that thing, and it will be you. So having that awareness that I am doing things is what we call self-consciousness. It's a sense of identity over time. So so maybe I'm going to try and look at how different fields look at self-consciousness, and then if that will help us understand what it is. So from psychology, self-awareness is looked at when they are trying to understand how awareness, attention, and perception shape how we behave. So knowing that there is someone called you, and then knowing that you can do things like think, act, and how that relates to how you behave is the interest of psychology in self-awareness. And then there is neuroscience. Neuroscience is just the study of the brain, and it is trying to understand how brain activities can lead to you understanding or developing that identity, which is going to be the subject to experience that you are going through around in your environment. And there is the meditative tradition, or from meditation perspective, they look at consciousness as something that can observe thoughts rather than be identical with thoughts. So you are sad, and then suddenly you start thinking, I am sad, and then you start looking at, it's as if you are observing that sadness in you, which is affecting you. And so from meditation perspective, they say that you have that ability to separate yourself from thoughts. Remember the wife was saying, we have power over the thoughts. So who is that we? Because she's saying that we need to control the thoughts, and we say thoughts are implies. So Ellen White is acknowledging that there is an identity that can separate itself from thoughts and then even control them. And that identity is what we are understanding as your consciousness from the perspective of being self-conscious. So you understand that I am not merely those experiences or thoughts that I am having, I am separate from them and I can control them. So, anyone with any question or comment? Yes, Brian.
Is there a difference between self?
The difference between
When the explanation seems to be the same.
yeah, almost the same. Only that this one is a more deeper perspective. The other one is general when you tell someone that I did something, so you acknowledge that you're Brian, for example. So just that acknowledgement at the surface level is what is covered. But now deeper, there is this perspective that now you can even separate yourself from thoughts. So it's the same thing, the way you were saying, only one is just a deeper understanding of, or a deeper diving the broader one. They are both like you subjective. They're both subjective because you acknowledge that I am the reference point. So when you are experiencing pain, that pain is not the focal point. You are the subject, and then this pain is just affecting who you are. So you can separate yourself from that pain. You can separate yourself from, in short, you can separate yourself from all the lower powers. Is that right? You can separate yourself from all the lower powers. Remember, thought is one of the lower powers. Another one is pain. Yeah, so who is understanding me? To help me explain. Joy. Okay. So, sorry?
That's the question.
The question is, when we say that you can separate yourself from thoughts, what does that mean?
Yeah, I don't think that you can open a brain and say this is the part of thoughts and this is the part of consciousness. I think these things can be so complex
Yes.
because all of them they come from the brain,
Yes.
part of our brain.
Yes.
So it's like when you say try to reason out.
Yeah.
Where does this come from? It's you. You know, depends on the information you are that when people and then people not page what you say. So I don't think these things they come from one pot, but they are quite different because the consciousness is when you are aware, you are alive, you can be able to reason out and take in thoughts. So I don't know how we can share it, but I can see your point
Yeah. So,
that consciousness can be quite different from thoughts.
Yes.
Because sometimes you can thoughts can take you far away.
Yeah.
And then you say no back.
Yes.
So what's that?
Yeah. So consciousness is that what Anna described, that you can acknowledge that I've wandered in thoughts. Is someone getting that? It is a model by the this is a model. Remember, we created a model of higher power and lower power. We gave a disclaimer that these are just simple models trying to understand complex things. So when we're talking about consciousness, the problem is when we look at it as if it is not a model, it's still a model. It's not really. You cannot go and measure now. This is the thought and everything. We're just trying to look at how our brains work and then try to create a model to help us understand and make good choices. So it's also a model. So when you say you can separate yourself from thought, I think Gladys has explained it in that you have the capacity to sit and say, I'm wandering in thoughts. Or when you say control your thoughts, what she's acknowledging is that you have the power to separate yourself from what you're thinking and then control them. Is that making sense? Yes, I mean.
So I was trying to think what you are explaining.
Mm.
I don't think that you are explaining two different things.
Yes.
Like you are there, these thoughts are here. So how I'm getting in my mind is you are trying to dismantle for the purpose of understanding.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I got it.
So don't look at it as if it is a scientific way of explaining how that thing mechanically works. We are just developing a model to understand. Because actually you can't say we don't even know what thoughts are in the first place, where they're coming from, no one knows. But having know the extent to which we can or how we respond to it can help us build that model. So so when you say that I'm feeling pain, you are acknowledging that that pain is not who you are. That is what I'm trying to explain. That pain is not who you are. It is just something that is happening and perhaps will pass. So again, you can say, I am having a thought. So even in that statement alone, I am having a thought, you are acknowledging that there is a more metaphysical world where you can retrieve and say that there is thoughts and I have good thoughts today, I have bad thoughts tomorrow. So this you is the one that is consistent in this whole story. So thoughts will change, feelings will change, and then you will make the subject who is experiencing them. So you are not an object, you are the point, you are the reference point to these experiences. Yeah, I know it can be complex, but I'm just trying to approach this as simple. So having mentioned that, now one of the explanation of how we develop that or how we describe that and changing you is the experiences. So it is a model that is self-model that is constructed. You can say, I am bad at something. You have someone say that I'm bad at maths, or I'm bad at, or the general stereotype. Women are bad at STEM. See, that is a claim. And that's one of the claims that was being debunked by the study of the gender brain. So when I say that I'm bad at something, that means I've created a self-model, and then I'm now evaluating myself in the result I'm getting when I'm trying to do those things. And then I create a model that, for me, this is not working. So you have this self-model identity of who you are. And then now you relate the experiences and the capabilities with that. So just that awareness that I am good at this, I am bad at this, I am experiencing these emotions, I am having these feelings. That experience or that awareness is what consciousness is. Just that awareness is not something tangible. Just being aware that all these things are happening to me. So you know your presence, you know who you are, you know what is happening to you, and you can mention them. So self-consciousness can be good and bad. And it can be good in the sense that it can help you develop good character. Remember, when you're looking at character, that character is awareness that when this happens, I am most likely to do this. So I'm most likely to be calm in a tense environment. I'm most likely to not react when someone does this. I'm most likely to be kind. So that self-awareness can be good when you are trying to develop a self-identity that is positive. Or in our case now, that is in line with the law of God. So if you have an identity, when I say that Lena is a good person, and Lena knows that she's a good person, what that means is that she she has created a model about herself that is predictable and that is helping her make decisions. So if she's kind, then when someone needy comes to them, and she has this self identity of I am kind. So that self identity is going to motivate her to do what? It reflects what she does, and again, on the other hand, it's motivating her to do the same thing over and over because you want to be consistent with who you are and what you do, because that is what we do. Trying to maintain, create a self identity, and then navigate the world with that identity, trying to be consistent in the decision making. That is the whole point of having a self identity. So it can be good when you use it to build a character that is, we say, good. It can be bad if it is leading to wrong results or results that are not according to God's will or law. So if you are abusive, or if you are, what is the character identity that you can pick? If you are what? A bad character identity. So if you're sexist, or yeah, if you view women as people who are lower worth, that identity, yes, it helps us describe you and predict what you're going to do. Number one, from our perspective. From another perspective, it's going to motivate you. It describes your actions or helping us understand your actions. But again, it's motivating you to make decisions when you meet cases where sexism can arise. So if you say that women should not speak when men are there, and then if you see a woman and they're trying to speak, what is your identity going to force you to do? To stand up and tell them to shut up. So at that level, that identity that you created and the awareness that you have that I'm sexist or I'm a person who believes in men and higher beings, that identity is going to affect your actions. So self-awareness, one, it is good if it's leading to the right result. It's bad if it's not leading to the right result. So any question up to that point? It is now clear that we are not going to move past that second. Any question up on it? Because I will post there, and then when I get chance in the next class, I will try to hurry up and then look at what prayer. The aim is to understand how prayer and meditation can help us with having the awareness of what consciousness is and how you can separate yourself, or the ability that you have, the awareness that you have to notice thoughts and deal with them. How meditation and prayer can help us now to solve the problem of having unwanted thoughts, causing us to be distressed, causing us to do action that we don't want. Because what we are trying to move away from is just throwing the responsibility to you and saying, you do good. We need to understand how do we work, how do our bodies work, so that when we have that understanding, then we can create best solutions. And I think some of the best solutions that you have from that perspective are prayer and meditation when dealing with thoughts as part of law and order. So when we have that awareness, we can point them, then we can use tools of prayer and meditation to deal with them, deal with bad thoughts, and sometimes cultivate good thoughts so that we follow what God wants us to do. So that has been the aim. So when I try to explain awareness and consciousness, you need to have that compass in mind that the study will ultimately lead to prayer and meditation. Meditation as a solution or as solutions to dealing with bad thoughts. And we understood that thoughts actually are the main thing in formation of character, behavior, and everything from the spirit of prophecy and even from science, because they cannot prove that your thoughts will lead to you forming identities, and identity will lead to you to having compasses that you are going to use to navigate the world. So whether they're bad or good, it is not relevant. So if I say from the first model that tomorrow I'm going to be a good person, and then I develop identity of being a bad person, then you can see the line and how most likely I'm going to fail. And the problem, but really get chances, just one minute. The problem with the initial model of 2017 is that it gives an incomplete solution that is going to lead to failure. And then on the other hand, provides a harsh condemnation through your conscious commenting you. Because when I say that you have the power to just do good and you don't understand how to do it, you're most likely going to fail. When you fail, I have another model that says your guilt should force you to acknowledge what you did, torment you so that you don't do it again, and then again you go and you fail. So it's going to put you in a loop of failure, condemnation, failure, and condemnation. And I think through God's mercy, we've come to redefine those things, the point that we can now come at a more practical perspective that is moving away from that model of failure and condemnation. I don't think that model is entirely wrong. I'm just saying it was incomplete. And when you have an incomplete thing, it can lead to imperfect solutions, which you don't want. So we will, I will try to simplify everything that I'm trying to speak about so that in the next class, we move to the next part, prayer and meditation. After refining the parts that we talked about, especially the conscious. Yes, next slide, please. Yes.
At what point does it become sin? At what point does at what I mean, so we are doing that every day and looking for mountains begins from a point. So at what point does it become sin at the point of the action? And you know, the reason why I ask this, I always come on when it comes to Matthew 20:28, when Christ said that every of them to sin, even they're just thinking. And the idea of the verse is I've done it it says now it adults will hide in your heart. And I'm thinking it's posing what out of it says that the hearts and the hearts, you know, like
Yeah.
it is what finding so thoughts lead me to the connect this one is better than other ones. So hence the question. Yes, I'm asking this. Or like maybe Christ is talking about something else. When he suggests that just having a thought is adultery.
Yeah, so we will not rush down. I am answering. So Q&A session, anyone with a question, you can write it down if you know you're going to forget it for the interest of time. So we are going to finish. We pray. God, we thank you for the session that we've had, and we appreciate the light that you've shown to us through the years that we've been grappling with the truth about the nature of human being. Because we know that we have the tools to develop the character that is good for humanity, which is your community. We pray that as we continue to grapple with this subject that can be more complex, may you give us the grace to have the knowledge to simplify them to the level that is going to help us reach the goals that you want. And we pray this believing and trusting in the name of Jesus Christ.